Hello class, it's Lacey Finley. I want to talk to you a little bit more detail about APA and plagiarism before you start working on any writing assignments for the course. So you should have reviewed most of this PowerPoint during Unit 1, but I am going to kind of talk about it in a little bit more detail so you can hear me tell you what the expectation is, because I don't want to see anyone running into issues with plagiarism or APA for that matter. So I want to talk you through a few things and show you some examples to make sure that you understand what my expectation is and you understand the expectation of the university as well. So learning this now is not only beneficial to you when you're in my courses, but it's beneficial to you as you move through your coursework, if you move into a graduate program, and even in the workplace. So I want to make sure that I am providing you with the information you need to be successful. So we are going to talk about APA and plagiarism. You should have already reviewed a lot of this presentation in the Unit 1 discussion, but I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about what plagiarism is and provide you with some examples. So plagiarism is passing off someone else's ideas or thoughts as your own. It is cheating, and it is not okay. So types of sources that can be plagiarized when writing a paper would be the textbook, online materials, manuscripts, and other students' work. The list goes on. The biggest thing that I see is online materials. I see a lot of copying and pasting into papers, and that is a form of plagiarism. The textbook is also used often, but more often than not I see people copying material from websites and then kind of finagling it a little bit to make it look like their own work. So the important thing for you to understand here is that plagiarism is when you use someone else's ideas or thoughts as your own. All papers and random discussion posts are run through Turnitin, and Turnitin will definitely pick these items up. If you submit someone else's paper, you submit a previous paper, or you submit information from websites, it will pick it up. So my job here today is to help you avoid having any issues with that and to show you what not to do and what to do so that this isn't an issue for you. Consequences of plagiarism: the first paper will receive a 0 grade. All papers will receive a 0 grade if plagiarized material is detected, and a plagiarism report is filed with the provost office, and then the university has different consequences that they lay out for students if it is a habitual issue. So, are there examples? I'm going to show you some examples that I've developed that there are things I see most often and ways to avoid them. The first example is right off a website directly into your paper. So you can see I went to the ache.org website, and for those students taking ethics and leadership in particular, that's a website you're going to use a lot. So I see this happen. Let's say, for example, a person's writing their personal ethics statement. So they would go to the ACHE website and be like, oh gosh, I love this ethics statement right here is really good, and then copy and paste it into their paper. That is definitely a big no-no. And you may say, oh my gosh, who would do that? Well, I've seen it many times. So that's why I'm telling you, don't do this. In this example, it was copied. These are just examples that I did to show you, copied directly from the website into the paper. The next example would be right off the website directly into the paper with a citation. So in this example I'm showing you, this is what I see most often. A person takes the information from the ACHE website, puts it into their ethics statement, and then puts an in-text citation at the end of every sentence. So they're saying, well, you know, this isn't my work, but here it is. So it's still word for word information with an in-text citation after it. That is a form of plagiarism, and you cannot do that. Another example is taking it off the website and kind of tweaking it. So in this example, what I did is I just took the first bullet point and changed some of the words throughout it. That, again, is not the way that you cite and acknowledge someone else's work. So in this case, I just did like the synonym. I used the synonym tool in Word and just changed create to generate and foster to nurture. That is not how you want to do it either. So some other examples are submitting a paper that was completed in a previous course. If you're retaking a course, you cannot resubmit a paper you already wrote. That is actually a form of self-plagiarism and cannot be permitted. Submitting a part of a paper that was submitted in a previous course, like taking a chunk of like 3 paragraphs out of a paper and then rewriting the rest. Submitting maybe your cousin's next door neighbor's paper. Don't submit other people's papers. Submitting a paper that was purchased, or submitting a paper by accident. I mention that because I think a lot of people do this tweaking method here. So they copy and paste a bunch of information in, and then they change the words. Sometimes they say, well, I accidentally submitted the wrong version of my paper. Once a paper is submitted, it is submitted. So you can't come back and say, well, that wasn't the right one, because it was submitted. And so I have no way of determining who's saying they accidentally submitted a paper and who didn't, particularly once it's already gone in through Turnitin and has been identified as plagiarized. So don't use this tweaking method. You need to read the material, and if you paraphrase material, you need to write it and provide an in-text citation. I'll provide you with an example of that in just a minute. So anyway, no accidental submissions. Excessive quotes is also another issue I see. So in this example, I took the material from the website and then I put a quote around it. So there it is. Everything's quoted, so I'm not plagiarizing, which is true. This isn't actually a form of plagiarism, but this isn't a paper that I'm going to grade. So you can't take a bunch of information off a website, put quotes around it, and call it a paper. And here's why. An academic paper should have very few, if any, direct quotes. Very few, if any, direct quotes. So providing a paper with several direct quotes does not show me that you comprehended the material. It shows me that you can tie other people's ideas together to meet the page requirement. So I don't give credit for other people's work. It's not plagiarism. This example would not warrant a plagiarism report, but it also wouldn't be graded. It's not plagiarism, but it's not an original submission either. So you should have very few, if any, direct quotes in your paper. You need to show me that you comprehend the material. So this example, I would send it back and say, you need to write your paper and not submit a bunch of direct quotes to me. So I wanted to give you a couple of examples of correct citations. So in this example, I read Creswell. I apologize for the typo there. It should be 2013, not 2013. I read Creswell. And then in my paper, I paraphrased material that I read in Creswell. Same with Stake. I read a great deal of information that Stake wrote. And then when I wrote my paper and I wanted to tie a point into what I was saying, I provided an in-text citation for material that I paraphrased from Stake. Now the other example here, I read several studies. So I read 3 studies, and I wanted to talk about information from all 3 studies. So that's how I developed this paragraph with these in-text citations, is reading the 3 studies and then talking a little bit about each of the 3 studies in this sentence, tying them all together, and then citing Baker for her discussion of promoting learning through planning a path of study, or citing Jinks on her research that discussed time parameters and establishing etiquette. So those are some examples of how you would provide in-text citations and paraphrase material in your papers. So then with that, I want to make sure everyone understands APA style. APA is what we're going to use in this course, and you should have already read through this and understand this, but a couple of points I want to make. APA formatting, 1-inch margins, 12-point font, double space, indent your paragraphs, include a cover page. You should have very few quotes within your paper. Don't use first person unless you're told to do so. I will let you go back and review a lot of this, but I wanted to touch on when you when do you cite your sources, when you direct quote a source, which should be infrequently, when you paraphrase. When you paraphrase means you've put the information into your own words, or when you summarize an idea from a source. So if the information didn't come straight from your own head, you should include a citation to tell the reader where you got the ideas in order to avoid plagiarism. So a lot of times you will read and you will paraphrase information from the sources that you read, and then you'll have your own ideas or opinions on it, and that's when you don't include an in-text citation, because if you developed your own thoughts on it, then you wouldn't include an in-text citation. But if it didn't come straight from your own head, you should include a citation to tell the reader where you got the information. So you will never have a reference without an in-text citation. You cannot have one without the other. So you must give credit in two places, within the text and at the end of the work in a reference list. Under no circumstance would you have one and not the other. At all times, you will have a reference on your reference page and in-text citations. The issue I see most often is people having a reference page with no in-text citations or not including all of their in-text citations. If there's not an in-text citation in your paper, it shouldn't be on your reference page. So make sure that you are providing in-text citations for all of the references on your reference page. In-text citations tell the reader where the information came from. So here's a few more examples of in-text citations within a paper. You will always put the in-text citation behind the paraphrased information, and then the period goes at the end of the sentence. So this is a great example. This is another good example. Fisher, 2009, recommended. You're still paraphrasing, you're not direct quoting. And then here's an example of direct quoting information if needed, which would be rare. And then just make sure that you're doing your references in APA format. There's a lot of examples at the end of the presentation that shows you exactly how to do that. So with that, I want to hop back up to the beginning and just make sure you understand that the expectation is that you provide correct in-text citations for paraphrase material. You're not doing any of these things that I discussed, and that if you have questions that you contact me and ask me so that we can move forward in a very productive manner within our courses. Thank you, and have a great time writing your papers and providing appropriate references.